As men's spirituality and personal growth begins to emerge as one of the things that's come as a direct response to the culture of toxic masculinity, a few names are leading the way in terms of providing support, services, programming, and our guest today is going to share with you some information about a men's retreat coming up at Samhain that I think you many of you watching might be interested in. More on that when we come back. You've tuned into The Brew, the talk show that explores queer spirituality, social issues, and pagan culture with me, your host, Dr. John Michael Salvato. And we are back with me, your favorite daddy warlock, John Michael Salvato, and welcome to another installment of The Brew, a weekly talk show focused on queer spirituality and culture from a pagan perspective. So if you're tuning in live, it reminds me, I've got to put my comments up on the screen so I can see. If you're tuning in live, go ahead and do me a favor, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, even if you're watching on the replay. And of course, we ask that if you value the programming that we provide you, you please consider sharing that with others, especially our YouTube channel, which you can now access through inneralchemy.online/YouTube, and our podcast available on iTunes and Spotify. So let me get my post-it note out of the way here. Our next guest is a published author that many of you will recognize from previous programs. He's a speaker and coaching partner, New Thought teacher, a practitioner of the magical arts, and an individual, genuinely salt of the earth individual. You've heard me use that term with him about him before, whose work revolves around helping others, serving others, including individuals, couples, and organizations, and helping them to achieve a life worth living through the creation of unique vision and mission statements, providing a basis for fulfilling our individual and joint goals. To assist with this, he has written 9 books, I think, most recently published in March 2018, From the Trailer Park to the Pulpit, Reflections on the Wise and Tacky Wisdom of Grandma Esther, which just absolutely cracks me up. He's a licensed social worker in Pennsylvania and an ordained minister. He's got an alphabet soup after his name, most notably a doctorate in divinity from the American Institute of Holistic Theology and a master's in social work from Temple University. And he's here today to talk about an incredible men's retreat coming up at Samhain, like I said before the show started. So welcome, Dr. Terry Drew Karanen.
Thank you.
It's great to see you back on this show, and excuse me. Before we even jump into talking about the retreat, what's been going on as you're? I know that you're expanding the focus and shifting some of the focus of the things that you do. Tell us what kind of led you to the point that you're getting ready to do this big retreat.
I was going to do it last year and it just didn't happen. So apparently it wasn't time. But there's so many wonderful people out there that are working with men. Casey Giovenko was on with me last show that I was on, and there's another gentleman out in Denver that's he's got it's called the Men's Ministry. Beautiful, wonderful, centered people that are doing work. But I got involved with doing men's work, particularly men's erotic work, with the Body Electric School of Massage and the Body Erotic Weekends, and almost became a trainer. I assisted a couple of times, but I saw what would happen with men when we got together, not just gay men, but men of all orientations, and how we could come together beautifully and to honor one another, primarily because we don't have that in our white male culture. I can't speak for other ones, but I can speak for that. The Jews, of course, have their bar mitzvah. We don't have any rites of passage, and we have very few role models, other than yourself, of course, to really help us through navigate what's going on. I was married at the time to a woman back in the 70s when I found the book, The Hazards of Being Male. That changed my life in so many different ways, primarily because I didn't know it was okay to feel the way I was feeling. Uh, and that changed so many things in my life because I began to start accepting myself. But many of us still have that attitude. Give you an example. We try so hard to be inclusive, and as men, especially white men, we are becoming more and more aware of how our words and our actions can be misinterpreted, or they can be interpreted in exactly the way that we're presenting them, but in ways that we didn't think about because we've gotten so used to working through what we the way we live and what we say. And so we have become much more kind and understanding when it comes to discussing women, not demeaning women. However, in the gay male community, we still have that stigma if you're a bottom. If you're the passive member of a relationship, or you're a passive member in some way, or even if you're a top, if you look passive, suddenly we're not, those aren't real men. We look down on them. We use the bottom instead of the same way that straight men used to use women, and some unfortunately still do. So this kind of attitudes goes through. We try to be what we think we're supposed to be, but it's maybe based on information that was faulty to begin with. The perfect lives that some people would purport that we had in the 50s very seldom, if ever, existed. There was the alcoholism, there was the cheating, there was the child abuse, and there was everything else. It just was a good time because people were making money,
Right, right.
but it didn't necessarily have anything to do with the way they were living their lives. And yet, Father Knows Best, My Three Sons, Donna Reed's show, these were all the ways that we learned how to um, to live our lives. Interestingly enough, I actually had that as part of the retreat that I designed. And then I realized some of the men coming that might come would have no idea who Father Knows Best was,
Right.
or My Three Sons. Um, Again, and that's the other part of this retreat, is that it's open to all ages and anyone who identifies as male. And that's going to push some people's buttons, I know. But that's the way these other successful groups that I've seen have actually, been successful, because they start breaking down barriers. And the more we listen to one another, the more we break down those barriers, the more we go into it with the idea to understand and to learn instead of to teach or to get bids, the better we're going to have a world around us that we can help make possible.
As one of the bottoms in the world who understands the secret that we actually rule the world,
Mhm.
despite what the tops think.
Yes,
um,
you do.
I really appreciate this, because I think there is definitely something going on cosmically, universally at this time. I was reading an article, terrific article, by somebody we've been trying to get on the show, Storm Fairy Wolf, who talks about how in his practice, as a radical fairy, that, or I don't know if even that's a current term anymore, a part of the fairy movement. I'm showing my Donna Reed age by remembering when
No, the
Harry.
radical, the radical fairies are still alive and
Okay,
well.
because when Harry first started it, I mean, that was my introduction. So,
Right.
but he was saying how, like, it's time now for us as men involved in magical esoteric practices, to take another look at what polarity really means. That so much of, and I've been really processing this a lot myself. So much of what we read, I mean, you have the lunar traditions, which are predominant, which are female centric and often female led, and where the origin story has almost has outlived its usefulness, but it's also sort of overshadowed the real practice. And then you have the solar practices, which are the male centric groups, some of the male centric groups, but they've never really kind of gotten a strong foothold because this struggle, this dichotomy is there between trying to incorporate the divine masculine and the divine feminine and doing it in ways that are really authentic and thinking that that has to fit a heteronormative model gets us in trouble because the heteronormative model has nothing to do with masculine and feminine. It's just the biological pieces of the puzzle fitting together a certain way. And I really liked what he said. And so when I saw the work that you're getting ready to do, I think, and the work that you've been doing, it feels like it's time. It feels like it's time as Casey's doing the great work that he's doing and so many others doing the work that they're doing. I find as a practitioner of the magical arts, and I would have told you and did when you were on the show last, that I identify as a witch, and I still hold that title as a means of reclaiming something that was pejorative, and because the word in Italian, svego mago or svega means witch, and so I'm kind of trying to reclaim that and take away the pejorative, but I find myself in a place where the only word that really fits is a practitioner of the magical arts or a sorcerer, because magicians were the male, the sun god centric, witches are the lunar centric, and we have all of this fighting taking place even on my timeline today, where someone said that you can't pretend that words only have one meaning, because he wanted to exclude women from the practice of magic in his mind. And some of the women he was talking about are non-binary people who happen to identify as male. And
the idea that it's interesting in the millennials, maybe a little before them, and whatever's coming after them, I can't keep track anymore. The idea that they don't want to be labeled has been confusing to people of our generation, especially men. And it has also been so freeing to be able to see people as who they are and to not even question who they're sleeping with or what they're doing or with whom or whom's they're doing it with. It's freeing in that we see people for who they are and how they can contribute to the community, to the tribe, to the workplace, to the world, to the country, to whatever it is that they're involved in. And so we have people that are bringing different gifts of being really who they are. I have tried for years to tell people how I can help them along the way, not to lead them or push them, but to stand beside them and allow them to have the healings that they want to have or need to have in their life. But there's so many different, like you said, like you, we're trained in a lot of different modalities, a lot of different ways we can go. There are some people in some of those modalities who are extremely upset that we won't stick with just that modality. I got away from the Christian idea of the one way, and then I got into metaphysics and New Thought, which if you go too far outside those lines, you're suddenly becoming a heretic in some way, which I've been accused of being. So the idea that we can help people in different ways is what has become my ministry in, say, the past 5 years. My blog is Making Sense of Life. And I used to struggle. I never really got that 30-second elevator speech down when people say, "What do you do?" And I get, "Well, I do this, and I do this." And they're like, "Yeah, okay." Or they say, "Well, I'm a reflexologist," or at the time I was a rebirther, or I'm a religious science practitioner, or I'm a witch, or whatever it is. That everything has an idea. Everybody has an idea of what that means. So now when people say, "What do you do?" and that includes at a full-time job that I still have, and the different ways that I help people in spirituality, I tell people, I help people make sense of life.
I love that.
It's way less than 30 seconds. And I don't say anything more than I just stand there and smile. And they go, "Well, how do you do that?" And I say, "Well, What bothers you? What isn't making sense to you in your life right now? And then we get to put on the social worker hat or the practitioner hat or the witch hat or the, whatever hat that I feel can help them. One of my practitioners, when I was growing up in New Thought, uh, had her, she had her business card, and it said, for support, call, and her name and number. And I said, well, how are they supposed to know what you do? And she said, well, how the hell am I supposed to know what they need? They might need a rebirthing session. They might need some practicing. They might need a spiritual mind treatment. They might need a bejeweled jockstrap, for all I know. If I can do it, I'm willing. If I'm not, I can broker it out to somebody else and help them find that. And that's what I've been trying to do. I told her at one point, I said, I want to be you. And she goes, no, you can't do that. And I found out that I couldn't. My boobs aren't big enough, so it's definitely she's quite a striking woman. But no, I could never be her. And I found out I don't want to be either.
But what you are doing is kind of keeping that legacy going, because you said at the very end, what I think is the next thing we're going to see in our movements, and that is the ability to be fluid enough, not just in gender roles, not just in sexual roles, not just in magical roles, but fluid enough to know where our boundaries are and say, I can't do that for you, but you know what? I know somebody who can. And to be connecting and interconnecting people, which is also what you're doing at this weekend. Tell us a little bit about the other guests or the other hosts that are going to be working the weekend with you.
Well, my other main co-host or my facilitator is Dr. Bobby Cook. His PhD is in molecular biology, and some of his work and his thesis was on the need for men of all genders to have physical contact with one another. And so many of the things that I've taught and believed from a spiritual standpoint, Bobby has distilled down into the scientific part. And then his partner Rich, they're the hosts of the I can never get this right. Copper Cactus Ranch Men's Retreat. It's about 60 miles outside of Phoenix, in the middle of literally nowhere. You come off the main highway and you go another 25 or 30 minutes on a dirt and gravel road, and you can definitely see the stars at night. Most of it will be Bobby assisting me, sometimes me assisting Bobby, and then Rich is running the logistics. He is in charge of the house and in charge of all the cooking. He's a great cook. And then there's also if you look at what the retreat schedule is, it talks about jamioki. Bobby's brilliant. He's a genius. He plays well 13 different instruments, and they have a karaoke setup in the ranch, and along with, they call it jamioki because they're also jamming with instruments, and it's just a fun time to be together and to relax. So that's going to be part of the retreat. But we got to talking about it. I went there privately, just as I was looking for someplace to be alone and be naked, because I was raised from a child. The nudity was just absolutely fine, and I wanted to be out in the wilderness, and I wanted to be out naked. And I found this place, how Spirit often sends things right to us when we need them. And I took some time out in February and just fell in love with the place, fell in love with Bobby and Rich, and started talking about how sad I was that last year the men's retreat that I wanted to do didn't happen. And so we reworked the name, and we reworked it around Samhain. So there's actually 4 parts to the retreat. It starts on the 31st. So that night we'll have a Samhain celebration, the end of the pagan New Year. And what they normally have on that weekend is a Day of the Dead, because being so close to Mexico, people are familiar with the Day of the Dead celebration. And it is not the Mexican way of celebrating Halloween, which we talk about, but that's going to incorporate the Day of the Dead from the Mexican, the Dia de Muertos, of the Mexican culture, but also with All Saints Days and All Souls Days, which is the Catholic part of this same year. Of course, as we know, all those Christian traditions come out of the pagan world. So we'll be doing that on the doing the Day of the Dead, and then the third day will be a bonding and rite of passage. We're going to find out how each of us can help the others in our group to have a rite of passage, to pass to whatever it is that you want to do. Maybe it's accepting your masculinity or what people talk about as being masculine. Maybe it's about discovering more of the feminine or the softer side of yourself, and learning how those different words, what those mean to each of us, and honoring what they mean. And the final day will be about defining our manhood, really deciding what it is that we want to do as men and how we can support one another. When I was growing up as a gay man, and I mean that from the time when I realized I was gay, which is about 21, I had no straight male friends. Once I came out as gay, I had no straight guys. I didn't. I was terrified because I was still coming out. It was not as open as it is now, and I didn't realize the lack that I had in my life. Today, I can't count the number of straight male friends that I have. There are 4 people in town that I can call up and go out for pizza and beer or go to a movie with. I called up a friend of mine a couple months ago when Atomic Blonde was out. My husbands are not interested in going to see that kind of a movie. I called up my friend and I said, hey, we're going to pick you up. We're going to go out and see Atomic Blonde. And he said, what is that about? I said, well, it's about a female James Bond looking blonde, and there's at least one lesbian scene. And he's like, I'm there.
That's
and,
awesome.
And, we hug, and he's not afraid to show affection. And what I've done is I've drawn men into my life that identify as heterosexual, even though I used to identify as gay and I don't anymore. But we see each other as people, and who we sleep with doesn't matter to that relationship, because we're forming these relationships without the stigma of what are we going to become, or what are we afraid of, or what will he want, and all those things.
What does this make us?
What does this make us? Yeah, I came out over the past 3 weeks as being pansexual, and not one person has mentioned it, including my own family. And I know people saw that, the happy face, it's I'm sure some of them were afraid of, oh my God, now what he's doing. And I realized that, after going back and watching all the episodes of Lucifer now and going through that series, that it really is not about who I'm going to sleep with, but about being a larger than what my labels in the past have defined me as.
Right on.
So, I mean, do I think about women? No. I used to be married, to a woman, a biological woman, and I was in a heterosexual relationship, for 2.5 years, until we discovered we had one big thing in common that required a divorce, since we were both Jehovah's Witnesses at the time. And that one thing was that we both like boys. So that was incompatible with the relationship that we had. But it's still part of my life, and I'm not ashamed of it, instead of saying, oh my God, you've been with a woman, as some gay friends of mine will say.
Right. Yeah, I'm actually going to be, you have to remind me, and I'll tell you the story later. I am going to be making up one of your Harrisburg Gay Men's Chorus performers, fellow performers, as B. Arthur, because he was saying he was going to do Liza Minnelli, and I said, I don't have that kind of makeup skills, but I'll tell you what, you definitely could be Arthur, and I could see, somebody, another little Ginger or something in the chorus being your Lucille Ball.
I love it.
and bosom buddies, and I don't know that he's ever done. No, he has done drag before. But what I want to come back to something that you were talking about, because I think that's another huge part. I had no idea that that was what was going on in your life. I think that's another huge part of kind of this convergence that's taking place in
Hmm.
the
I
men's
agree
movement.
completely.
And so what, if anything, or and I should, this is one of those things where I do wish we were scripted, because, and you could just tell me that's not part of this, but um, for me, whenever I plan a retreat, whenever I do a retreat or even participate, uh, the thing that always seems to be left out the most is the fourth day. And what, if anything, are you guys doing or planning for your fourth day experience? You know, like from the, you know, for those who are watching who don't know church talk, in terms of retreat, is the day that you leave the retreat going
Mhm.
forward. It's not
Yeah,
literally just that fourth day.
we're actually going to use, it's something I haven't discussed at all, but in the instructions, once people register for the retreat, and the way they do that is by confirming a room accommodation at the ranch, and then they get the other information. But what I'm asking people to do when they come is to bring a picture of themselves between the ages of 3 and 7. Or if they don't have one, if they can find a picture in a magazine or online or something that they can print out that represents who they were at that time. And the reason for that is we're going to write a letter to that little boy, and we're going to tell him what it is to be a man. We're going to tell him what it means to live the life that he wants to live, and how we wish we could have told him certain things at different points in his life as he's growing up. I did this years ago, and I still have the letter and the picture of the little boy on my bookcase. And
Me
I
too.
still go back to that because I didn't get that kind of training. I had great parents. I had wonderful parents who did the very best they could with what they had to work with, which was a very strange child and no handbook. So they did the best that they could do, and I do not fault them in any way. But there were things that I would have loved to have heard, and so I get to rescript that past. We can't go back and change the past. We can't. We can't. The future's not here yet, so we do live in the present. But I can choose how I choose to think about what happened in the past, no matter what it was, whether it was good or bad, however I judged it. And I want to give that to the guys that come, so that they will have something. And I'm hoping that we will maintain these relationships, whatever relationships and friendships are created over this week, this 4 day period, which should actually be longer. I mean, I'll be there on the 31st, but I'm planning on staying a little bit afterwards. People can come before and stay after. The place is open 7 days a week, so except for July and August when they just close because it's too damn hot. But
Yeah.
yeah, no one is going to be coerced or pushed or put down for not wanting to do something or wanting to do something. It is a clothing optional resort. I'm going to be naked most of the time, so if that bothers somebody, then they need to realize that. If, however, people want to come and they are not comfortable with being nude, they don't have to be. I would suggest you wear comfortable clothes because we're going to be doing a lot of moving around and diet and triad work of that sort. But for those who would like to be nude but are afraid to be, or are reticent about showing their body for whatever reason, there is a beautiful disrobing ceremony that we've developed that will help. We will help our brothers out of their clothes in a loving manner.
Right
And
on.
really, once everybody gets naked, nobody wants to put clothes back on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it does definitely get rid of a lot of the barriers.
And tell everyone, as we're getting to the end of the half hour, tell everyone, if you would, how to get more information, and how to get in touch with you, either through your blog or through Facebook.
Well, my name's on the screen, so that's my website,
Oh,
Terry.
it's not. It
Oh,
doesn't show up on the screen.
okay. Well, it was on the original
Yeah, yeah.
posting
We'll
you
put
put
it
out.
in the comments, and we'll put it at the end of
Yeah,
the video.
it's terrydrewkaranen.com. and then just click on the tab for Men's Retreat. And all the information is basically there, and also another PDF that you can pull up. If you're interested in knowing more about it, you can contact me. We can talk one-on-one. But to actually make a reservation, you don't go through me. You go through the ranch, Copper Cactus Ranch, and their link is in the website. It's a very rustic looking place on the outside, and the rooms inside are absolutely beautiful. I've stayed in hotels that aren't this nice. And the food is phenomenal. And yes, there is liquor included if you so desire. And something you should know is that there is no charge for this retreat. There is a charge for the accommodations, and then whatever there is, then you pay extra for the food and whatever liquor you decide you want. But the run of the place is yours. There is no charge for the retreat part of this 4 days. We'll be setting up an altar or teaching people how to set up an altar for those of you who are not interested or not comfortable with or have ever done that. And there will be a love offering basket that will be available, and that love offering will be split between the ranch and myself to show appreciation for whatever work that I've been doing on this, and also to help out the ranch. I mean, they have a well project right now, which could use some funds. But again, it's there, it's off of the corner, it's available for people to show their appreciation financially if they want to, but that would be extra. It's like going to your massage therapist. Tips are appreciated but not expected.
Right. Very, very good. And if you would, when we jump off here, if you wouldn't mind putting in the Facebook comments, your contact information and a link to the ranch as well. I know folks will appreciate that. And I just adore having you on.
Thanks.
And we'll actually be seeing you in a couple weeks for our turnabout.
Oh, yes, we will.
Our turnabout day when Terry will turn the table and will get to interview me, and I'm looking forward to that because it's been a long time since I've been interviewed, and in fact, the last person who interviewed me was Robert Brzezinski when I think he was starting ministerial school.
Oh, has been a while.
That goes back.
Oh, dear me.
So, and I know Robert watches this, so hello to you, brother. And hey. I want to say hi very quickly to Deborah and to Jeffrey, who tuned in live during the live broadcast, and to everybody who's watching on the rebroadcast. Again, we thank you for being part of this. Remember that these conversations are all about your participation. So even after the show is over, if you've got questions or comments, you want to know more about the retreat, go ahead and leave those messages in the comments, and we will see them and get back to you. Next week on The Brew, we are having another treat as three of the most absolutely incredible, kick-ass, insightful women that you could ever want to hang with are going to share the panel with me as we talk about magical thinking and its connection to the research we've been doing on the gut microbiome, science, and mental health. And I'm really just excited. There's one of the women is an empath professionally. All of us have been working in our own ways, addressing mental health, mental wellness, particularly as many of you know, the 4 suicides in the last 6 weeks that have occurred among those that I care about deeply. And when I started to reach out, which really goes to what Dr. Terry was saying on this show, when I recognized that the only place to be was the moment, it's the only place we can be, and started to reach out to see what I could do to let folks know that they're not alone, that their story is not over, that somebody can be there to help them to navigate the waters I've had to navigate as a suicide survivor, and somebody with PTSD. All of these people just started to fall into place in my life, and we started running into one another in other people's broadcasts and rooms. And I just said the other day, okay, that's it. Beck, I want you on, and then I just went through the list, and I said, can you be on my show? And one person said no, they're not into metaphysics, but the rest of them all said that just sounds like a fun and kick-ass half an hour. So they will be on the show next week, and then Terry will be back the week after. And if I had the musical capabilities here, I would do the dun dun dun. uh,
No, it's going to be fun, and wine is still involved, correct?
yes, wine is absolutely
Okay,
involved.
it's always cocktail hour somewhere, so that's
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah.
I'll, cheers to that.
I
Um,
I just want to say before you close, thank you so much on behalf of myself, also on behalf of Bobby and Rich. We really appreciate this opportunity to get this word out, and just thank you so much.
Well, and let's let this be the start of exploring the possibilities of doing more that way, because I love what they're all about. I went and looked at the website, and like we said before the show started, were it not with everything I have going on, I would be there without question. And I think it's just time. It's time that men, that anything we can do, anything I can do to help support that, anything that you do, I know, to support that, that it goes to what we say at the end of every one of these programs, that when you come back to the moment, that's where the power is. And I've really been convinced for these last 6 or 7 months, and it amazes me in a way that so many people are finding themselves in that same place and expressing that when we're in the moment, those none of those labels work. Gay doesn't work,
Right.
bi doesn't work, poly doesn't work. None of it works, because in the moment you realize that it's only about that relationship at that time.
Mhm.
And every relationship I've ever had
Mhm.
has defied a label in some way.
Yeah.
Whether that was defying the label of being within the confines of the triad, or the five of us, or there should be, and it's because it's not organic to put fucking labels on love.
Yeah.
and
It's
and
like
I
when
think,
people ask me, well, how does that work? And my answer is very well, thank you.
yeah, and it goes to your answer. What do you do? I help people solve their problems. I help people make sense of life. That's what we're all about here, and so I love and appreciate and honor that in you. I
Thank you
look
so
forward
much.
to hearing back from you after the retreat. And guys, please consider getting in touch. I mean, there are a lot of things you could be doing at Salon. I understand, but remember, next year there's still going to be a bunch of folks gathering around in a circle and pretending that what Gerald Gardner said happened in the ancient days happened. So that fantasy will still be there, just like Dune will still be there, and you know uh, the next episode of Sabrina will be there. Why not do something different this year? Something for you. I look at it this way. We do at the high Sabbats, we do things for our community. We connect with our community. The best thing you could give to your community at the winter solstice is to be the best version of you possible. So why not take Samhain, the end of the year, the beginning of the new year, and make that something you do for yourself,
Absolutely.
because we deserve it. So
I
Terry, thank
works
you.
for me. Thank you.
And everybody, thank you for watching. As we say in the beginning of the end of every show, stay in the moment. Be grateful for what you've got. If you can't bring gratitude to this moment for what you have now, there is absolutely no reason to think you're going to be any happier with more. And always remember, the best is yet to come. We'll talk to you soon.
All
Love you
right.
guys.